The Pittsburgh Steelers cannot say they own the Cincinnati Bengals anymore as the Cincinnati Bengals travel into Pittsburgh and pick up a big road victory, divisional win for themselves, and hand the Steelers a pretty bad early season loss. 24-10 the final score as the Bengals pick up the win. The Steelers now fall to 1-2 on the year. Yet another loss on the board for Pittsburgh. Back-to-back weeks here at home after opening up the season with the road win over Buffalo. This is your Steelers postgame show here on Pittsburgh Sports Live, and of course, Steelers Now. I'm your host, Mike Asti, and I'm going to be joined for this show by Josh Carney, who is a writer with the Beaver County Times and also a contributor with Steelers Depot, to unpack this game and to talk about the issues that are just at a premium for the Pittsburgh Steelers and which one of these issues, or if any of these issues, can be fixed this year, and then preview next week in Lambeau, and if things can be fixed that quickly to help the Steelers get back on the winning track and salvage this season. So, Josh, I definitely appreciate you joining me here on the program for sure. This is your first time here, part of our post-game show, so happy to talk with you. And I do want to just get things started. We got a lot to talk about here with – it's a home game. Steelers usually own the Bengals. They had a lot of injuries entering this game, but the Bengals coming off a loss as well. A young quarterback, normally something the Steelers defense feasts on, and they did get a turnover early. I think most people probably thought maybe the Steelers would get this win. Granted, the injuries maybe had some people leave the betting lines, but this was a game the Steelers never had control over. What went wrong for Pittsburgh, if you can kind of summarize this game? And it's a lot to talk about that we'll certainly get to. 24-10 the final. It was certainly lackluster early on in that first half, but then once the Bengals got going and they got over that turnover, they were able to explode and do enough on offense. And the Steelers offense, of course, sluggish most of the day yet again.
Yeah, I think that's the issue right there. It's just it comes down to the offense, those guys in the trenches, and who's at quarterback right now. Obviously, the offensive line struggled mightily. Every starter along the offensive line recorded a penalty on the day, wiped out a handful of Najee Harris big runs. So that's a little frustrating considering the struggles that the guys have had on the ground to start the year. But, there were plenty of instances in this game where Roethlisberger, I even tweeted this, he looked like it was over for him. And then that 2-minute drive in the fourth quarter, he starts throwing some seeds all over the field. You can't go no huddle all game long, especially in the NFL at this point, but injuries on offense, underperforming offensive linemen, the struggles to be on the same page with receivers. I don't know how many times we have to see Roethlisberger throwing to a spot expecting a receiver to be in that area and the receivers open elsewhere. So it's just, this offense is a mess. I figured coming into the year it would be a struggle offensively with a new offensive coordinator, a lot of moving parts. But Mike, I was not expecting what we've seen the last 2 weeks. And I don't know that it can be corrected quickly enough, as you mentioned. So
and we will certainly get there, though. Josh Carney, me joining us here on the post-game show for Pittsburgh Sports Live and Steelers Now. The Steelers lose 24-10 to the Bengals. And the story really is the offense just not good enough, just not doing enough in this game. The defense certainly did enough last week. The defense was able to force some turnovers in this game. They did bend at times. They didn't totally break, and then they had a lot to deal with towards the end of this game. They certainly didn't enter this game very healthy either. But really, as much as I also expected this offense to struggle, and I think people also underrated the fact that unlike Brady going to a new team where they built everything around him, or Favre switching teams where he was making sure he was with the same type of offensive system. We saw Peyton Manning do a similar type of thing. Ben at 39 is learning a completely new offense that he never dealt with before. It's not really like the other Hall of Famers that have done it before. And he's doing it with a very porous offensive line that is now incredibly banged up. Chuck Okorafor, who has been the veteran of the group with Zach Banner still out, now he leaves the game. Kendrick Green leaves the game as he's thrown right into the fire to be the center after Pouncey retires. Who knows if these guys can even go next week? We're going to get people off the street here to play O-line at some point for the Steelers. And if that all does not eventually click, nothing else really can. But before we get to Najee Harris, who again, 40 yards, not enough from him despite a couple bursts. Ben Roethlisberger, of course, not having his best day. You mentioned that maybe this is the end of the line for Ben. Now, I think we probably can agree Mike Tomlin's not going to pull that trigger just yet.
Right.
And I would be willing to bet my house Ben's going to be starting next week in Lambeau as long as he is healthy. But there was some chatter around the press box. There were some fans booing at times here at the stadium at Heinz Field. Already less people here in attendance than were there a week earlier. Ben just didn't look good. He didn't look like he had it. He looked more of the end of the season Ben than the earlier of the season a year ago Ben. He was missing receivers. Even when he was airing it out with his arm, he was overthrowing the ball. So he showed he has maybe arm strength that's now there, but he's not on target. He's not having the chemistry, and they're also banged up at receiver. If it's up to you, are you switching quarterback right now, knowing that it is still early in the year? And I don't think anyone necessarily can say they are sold on Mason Rudolph or Dwayne Haskins. And that's the options right now for the Steelers.
Right. No, I think this is an instance where you have to let Ben kind of ride out on his shield. You just have to let him figure it out. This is, in a sense, this feels like the last ride for him. The Steelers.
If it wasn't already, it really feels like that now. I don't think I was going to bet he was back next year anyway, but this really looks like he's going to be asked behind closed doors. This got to be it now.
Yeah, and like you mentioned at the top of the show, this is week 3, but this feels as bad as it's gotten, and it's always tough to watch a star player decline right before your eyes. But I think that's where we're at. He's 39 years old. Some people will say, well, look at Tom Brady. He's 44 and still getting it done. Tom Brady has never taken the abuse physically that Roethlisberger has taken. So it's a different situation. But I think this is the team that Kevin Colbert put together. You just have to ride it out. But I don't think that Roethlisberger is the right fit at quarterback in a Matt Canada system. So that's kind of where we're at. You're handcuffed as a play caller. Yeah. You can't call the offense that you like because you have that legend still under center. So it's tough.
Yeah, and of course, you bring in Haskins as low risk, high reward. He didn't do anywhere near enough in the preseason to show anything. Mason Rudolph has improved from where he was 2 years ago, but certainly no one is yet sold on him, even though he has got better than maybe some would like to admit. But Ben Roethlisberger, entering the year, was your best option. Certainly, if you could get near what he was at the beginning of last season. Prior to today, he was at least cutting down on mistakes if he wasn't able to carry you any further. But the problem is, as you mentioned, Matt Canada's offense, much more than even Randy Fichtner, it really relies on blocking, tight ends. Freiermuth has kind of emerged as a pass catcher, but they didn't really have a great blocking tight end. He's done it a little bit. Obviously, the line's not blocking. He has a young center. He loses the continuity. It's crazy. I mean, honestly, I think he's pining for the days of Alejandro de Villanueva and David DeCastro right now, because at least they would know the plays and they wouldn't have to totally learn everything on the fly, which, again, this offensive line might be good next year, but likely next year is without Ben Roethlisberger. Again, the Steelers lose at 24-10 to the Bengals. Steelers now 1-2 on the year. They do drop one in divisional play. I said entering the game, this was a must win. It's hard to say that in week 3.
It felt like it.
Yeah, we'll get to where we go from here for the Steelers, because they don't have an easy game coming up. The schedule does not get easier, and they're playing tougher quarterbacks this year than last year when they faced a lot who were dealing with injuries and potentially the backups playing as well against the Steelers. But separate from Ben Roethlisberger, because while I might actually make the move to Mason, it doesn't matter. It's not going to happen. Ben is going to start against Green Bay at this point, and Ben finishes 38 for 58, 66 completion percentage, 318 a TD, but a couple picks, sacked 4 times. The O-line didn't hold, a quarterback rating of 70. The yards are there, but it's like the playoff game. The yards don't matter when you have that many turnovers. And Ben Roethlisberger at this age is not going to be able to be successful throwing almost 60 times. It's just not going to work. But it had to happen again because they didn't get enough out of the running game. Now, Najee Harris, 19 carries, 14 carries, 40 yards, an average of only 2.9, which is just pedestrian for any running back, let alone an elite running back that they certainly have the hopes of. We've seen flashes. What I was looking at there, 19 targets as a receiver, 14 catches, 102 yards. So he was used as a pass catcher a lot more than he's been earlier in the year. How can the Steelers get Najee Harris going? Because I was also sitting out there doing some Bengals post-game interviews before doing this. Alan Saunders handled the Steelers. I handled the Bengals to get those wrapped up quick. And a lot of the Cincinnati media were asking Burrow and company, well, what did it mean to you to face a team like this? And then the Bengals defensive players, well, how did you deal with a team that's so predicated on the run? And I'm thinking, I don't know if they didn't watch the Steelers the first 2 weeks. They haven't been able to get the running game going. That's the idea, but they actually haven't been able to get the running game going. What can the Steelers do to get Najee Harris unlocked? Is it more of him as a receiver? Is it simply it can't happen as a running back with this offensive line? So until that's healthy, it just isn't going to occur? Or do they need to keep just feeding the beast a little bit more? Again, 14 carries on the ground, under 20 carries on the ground, regardless of what you do as a receiver, seems like not enough. He's not paid as anything but a running back number one.
It's a little bit of everything. I mean, I think that the 19 targets was very high and probably a little unnecessary. But in the grand,
I couldn't even believe what I was reading there for a second.
He's going to be very sore this evening. But you've got to get him involved underneath, check downs out of the backfield, aside from 4th and 10 when you have to score a touchdown there. But that's what you have to do. You kind of have to get the defense moving laterally. That'll open up some rushing lanes. But to get him involved more running the football, you've got to hit some of these deep shots. You've got to take advantage over the middle of the field and open up that box. And the Steelers just aren't able to do that right now. So, teams can kind of sit in too high and just really load the box, and they're not scared of the deep shots. And that makes it so hard to run the football, especially behind an inexperienced offensive line that doesn't really have anyone aside from maybe Kevin Dotson and I would say semi Kendrick Green at this point that are legitimate run blockers. Dan Moore was more of the athletic guy who could run block, but he needs to develop there. Trey Turner isn't a run blocker. And then I think we know where we're at with Chooks Okorafor, but it's going to take time. And, I know that there were a lot of people saying, oh, Najee's going to break the rookie rushing record for the Steelers, with an added game. He might not even crack 1,000 yards at this point. So I think it's honestly, Mike, I think it's a little of everything. They've got to throw the ball better. They've got to open up, things in the middle of the field that'll open up running lanes, and offensive line needs to be better. And Najee needs to be a little bit better. Looking at some of the all 22 film from the last 2 weeks, he's missed some holes, or he's been hesitant to press the line and hit the holes at the right time, and they close up. So it's everyone collectively has to be better. But I'm very pessimistic that it will get better because of the talent up front.
And we're seeing a lot of chatter. See, the offense is offensive. How clever that one is there. Ben is done in capital letters. If you're the GM, what positions are you drafting? We'll maybe talk about that later. Who knows? We can talk about that all season, all off season. It's the O-line that is making Ben look bad. I got to be honest here. I don't think the O-line is single-handedly making Ben look bad, but I will say it's certainly harder on an aging quarterback when the offensive line is not blocking. The comparison to Tom Brady are always going to be there, and it's also possible Ben is not Tom Brady. We're looking at potentially the GOAT. Ben's a Hall of Famer, but not yet Tom Brady. Mm-hmm. And Tom Brady is aided by a great offensive line. Not the case for Ben Roethlisberger with the Steelers. This is just a compounding of poor things around Pittsburgh. It's all about the offense being negative right now, and that then kind of fits the overlying theme. If any of this can even be fixed, can any of this be fixed for you, or what would need to occur for any of this to be fixed offensively? Juju leaves the game. They're once again banged up at receiver. Deontay Johnson missing this game. Ray McLeod was freaking used as the number one receiver at one point in this game. Yeah, and Najee Harris told us all through camp, it's good on good. I don't care who's out there. It could be the Cowboys' early 90s offensive line. They're going to miss blocks. It's good on good. I got to make something happen. He's kind of shown that he's a rookie. He's not a veteran. He's not always going to make something happen. So, yeah, no one's criticized him, but he has missed some holes, even though it's not easy on him. But with everything we've said to this point on the show, can the Steelers fix this offense quickly? And what would they need to do to try to makeshift fix it? You can't make people healthy, but how can they try to put some scotch tape on this to try to crawl through some of these games early in the year?
I think that the glaring area that they need to start taking advantage of is middle of the field, that 12 yards and further, because if you look at some of the passing charts from Ben Roethlisberger, he does not target that area of the field. So, the safeties don't have to worry about guarding that area. They can just push towards the sidelines and take away those deep shots. Pat Freiermuth can win in that area of the field. Eric Ebron, for all his warts, showed last year that he can win in that area of the field. And I don't think Roethlisberger has attempted to throw in that 12-plus yard window down the field, at this point in the season. I think you got to start there. And by doing that, it's all a puzzle piece, Mike. Like if you start targeting that area of the field, that gives the safeties more to worry about. and it might open up more deep shots or more of those cover 2 hole shots down the sideline that Ben likes to look for. And in doing that, you open up the box some, and it's not, 5 linemen against 7 or 8 defenders. It's 5 linemen against 6 because people are dropping out. And then you have Najee Harris potentially getting a one-on-one situation in the running game. I do need to see more balance, though, and a little bit more creativity from Matt Canada. I know people are going to lament the 3rd and 23 screen. It just felt like there were some situations where it's like, why are we calling this? Why is this the setup? Where is the creativity? And I think, as I mentioned earlier, I think he's a little handicapped by who's under center, but we got to see something a little bit better. Set defenses up a little bit more. And I don't think that's happening right now. And I don't think it's a quick fix. I think they kind of just have to limp to the bye week at this point and hope that injuries are kind of, on the lower scale of things and hope that they can get some things corrected come that bye week. But
injuries on the lower scale of things is not the case right now
right.
for the Steelers. So maybe they need some luck there to try to have that improved by the bye week. Josh Carney joining me here from the Beaver County Times and, of course, Steelers Depot here on our Steelers Now post-game show here on Pittsburgh Sports Live. Subscribe to this channel if you like what you watch, like what you hear, and also head over to Steelers Now for all our post-game coverage and this channel for any of our video reaction coverage here from Alan Saunders, Nick Faribaugh, and myself, who were in attendance covering this game. The Steelers do lose it 24-10. Now, you did touch on Matt Canada, and I think we'd be remiss if we didn't touch on Matt Canada. He is that piece. He's the offensive coordinator this year, quarterbacks coach last year, sprinkled some plays in last year. People argued we didn't see enough from him. Well, now we're giving him the keys to this Cadillac, and maybe it does of an aging quarterback, and maybe it does of a poor so line. I don't think much can get going unless those two things are fixed. But is there anything for you that Matt Canada could be doing more of? Is there anything that you like or maybe that needs improved in this offense? What have you seen from Matt Canada's offense to this point? Because there are some fans out there that already want Matt Canada fired. It sounds unreasonable with all the hype that was around him before the season, and we are only 3 weeks in. I do think some people don't understand the situation that he is under because Ben was really forced to be back. It wasn't his decision. And the O-line is certainly not strong enough to help him. But anything for Matt? Does Matt Canada deserve any criticism here individually, separate from everything else going on, I guess would be the better question.
I think he deserves a little bit of criticism. But again, I think it's just, this isn't his true system. This isn't the system that, fans saw at Pitt or at NC State or even a little bit at LSU. Like, he's handicapped, or he's really handicapped by Roethlisberger, and I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean, he came into a system where he knew that there was a 39-year-old quarterback in place,
right.
And he kind of had to adjust it, and it's been a tough adjustment for the first 3 weeks. I don't know if there's anything more he can add at this point. I did see a stat the other day from ESPN. They're only using pre-snap motion like 12% of the time, which is 17th in the league, and I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but all we heard all offseason was pre-snap motion. Right. We're not seeing it, and I don't know.
2 tight end sets, etc.
Right, and we're not seeing it, and when they are in 2 tight end sets, it's a dead giveaway because they're running the football. We're not seeing a ton of play action. I think I saw play action once today, and Roethlisberger took a sack on the play. I don't know what Matt Canada can really do aside from maybe going gadget at this point, but I don't want to see any gadget plays.
And how long is that going to work too? That's
right.
Not really a long-term fix here. Getting a lot of chat as well here with the season is over. Come on, Steelers. Play calling is horrible as well. I love when people use all caps as if I need to read it in all caps. I'm getting older here, but I can still read. I don't need the capital letters here. The O-line is even worse than last year. We already touched on that a lot. And I think, honestly, people were kind of maybe not understanding that was a major possibility. Yes, maybe they're younger and you think there's more talent, and maybe people think they're dried up in terms of DeCastro and Alejandro Villanueva, who's still struggling with the Ravens. But veterans who are struggling is better than a rookie who is struggling. Like, at least there's continuity and they know the plays and there's some familiarity that Ben could help with, or something could go on. And maybe it's all for naught if Ben just doesn't have it. But this is a Steelers offensive line that are trying to learn on the fly, that aren't really healthy, and they also aren't playing well. And it was just penalties galore in this game. Yeah. Honestly, you could make an argument this was the worst day at the office
Absolutely.
for the offensive line of the entire season. They actually have been progressively getting worse, when at least the glass half full could be they would get their stride in and get better as the season progressed. Maybe if you could crawl in the playoffs with 7 spots, they would finally be good by that point. They're actually getting worse. So Josh Carney here out of the Beaver County Times and also Steelers Depot joining me here on our Steelers post-game show on PSL and Steelers Now. Defensively, the Steelers defense, I don't think it's fair to blame them for how the season has gone to this point.
Mm-hmm.
However, they are also banged up. And then towards the end of this game, you saw Joe Burrow also hit his stride and kind of shake off that interception early, which the defense did create, and then also start to pick it up. This isn't like it was 2 years ago where Minka, etc., could steal a game or could dominate. Their presence wasn't felt as much. What did the Bengals do, or what did you see in this game that kind of took the Steelers defense a bit out of it towards the end and allowed the Bengals to have more success as this game unfolded?
I think they just protected Joe Burrow very well. I mean, obviously that's easier to do when TJ Watt's not playing, Alex Highsmith isn't playing. You're still missing, Tyson Alualu and Stephon Tuitt. But they gave Burrow time. And then you put guys like Jamar Chase one-on-one against a guy like James Pierre, who I think had 27 snaps coming into the year, and Chase creates separation down the field. You miss some tackles here in open space, give up a touchdown to Tyler Boyd early on. But Burrow has always been a guy that when he can sit in the pocket and get into rhythm, he is going to carve up a defense no matter what level he's in. We saw that at LSU in 2019. Once he adjusted to the NFL before he got hurt last year, he was doing that. And then you saw it in the second half. He just knew where he was going with the football. He wasn't afraid to cut it loose. And they just have a balanced offense. They were able to really run the football downhill against the Steelers. And when you wear those guys out at pass rusher running the football, they're not going to put heat on you in the pocket. And it's just, you can't ask defensive backs to cover for 4 or 5 seconds in this league. And I think that's what we saw in the second half. And it's a little concerning because I think we had Derek Tuska and Jameer Jones rushing at one point. And it's like, Cam Hayward was rushing from a 2-point stance off the edge. It's just, it was bleak out there in the second half and through no fault of their own. I mean, injury bugs can bite any team at any time. And it looks like the Steelers are, the team on the menu this season. So, I think that's what we're going to see from Burrow just moving forward, Mike. I mean, when he's protected and has time, he's got the weapons and he can carve teams up.
He did play really well right out of the gate his rookie season. Injuries derailed that. He started off this year playing great, picking up where he left off. He did have an off game last week that led to the Bengals' loss with all those interceptions, but it really shows moxie out of him to kind of pick himself right back up and rebound with a game like this. That gives you confidence if you're a Bengals fan that he could potentially be that guy finally, maybe even more so than recent guys they've had in Andy Dalton and company, that he is not going to let one bad game compound and be 2 or 3 bad games. He turned it around right in this one, 14 for 18, but this is also the difference. He wasn't asked to do nearly as much as Ben was in this game, and he's the younger quarterback who's being more efficient. 14 for 18, very efficient ball, just under 80% completion percentage. Maybe they want a little bit more out of him as a passer, but 172 yards, 3 TDs, 1 pick, a QB rating of 122.9, even had 7 carries on the ground. Yeah. He had a solid outing, to say the least, and it's a Bengals team that maybe is underrated for some. I thought they were a year or so away from really being good, even though they would compete this year. But if we see more of this from Joe Burrow, maybe they could compete. And as the way the Steelers are going, maybe they're last in the division at this point here. Yeah. You never really know, because easily could be 1-3, 1-4 with what's coming up. And we will preview those games here in a second. Josh Carney joining me here on our Steelers post-game show. Josh out of the Beaver County Times and Steelers Depot. Now, that does take me to the Steelers' next opponent here, as they will try to rebound and leave Pittsburgh, which maybe Pittsburgh's not been friendly to them. They are 0-2 here at home after being 1-0 on the road to start the year. They will go to Lambeau Field, a tough place to play. A later game, 4:25 next Sunday. It's against Aaron Rodgers and the Pack. They've dealt with drama. They certainly started off the season poor, but they've turned it around. It's not going to be an easy team to face by any means. You're going to need to be healthy. And Joe Burrow mentioned it was easier to scheme knowing TJ Watt wouldn't be there. We'll see if Aaron Rodgers is dealing with TJ Watt or not. A lot of question marks this coming week on who will be healthy for the Steelers as well. What are the keys for the Steelers in that game against Green Bay? What does the Steelers need to do to have a chance against Green Bay And again, our theme here of the show, is any of that even possible? Is this even fixable? Or are we really seeing the beginning of the end that maybe was earlier than some expected?
I think offensively, the Steelers should be able to run the football better next week. Green Bay doesn't have a great front at this point, especially with Zadarius Smith out. He's on IR at this point. I think if you can run the football and kind of hit some of those deep shots, I know that Jair Alexander is their lockdown corner, so maybe avoid him. But I would go after Kevin King. I'd probably go after the rookie Eric Stokes, who came on Monday Night Football last week. But you have to have Chase Claypool just turn in a dominant performance, especially if he's matched up against Kevin King. And you got to see Pat Freiermuth work over the middle of the field. Defensively, it's tried and true. You have to get pressure on Aaron Rodgers. He's not as mobile as he once was. He's still a darn good quarterback.
Yeah, we saw a team get to him, though, in week 1. I mean, he was horrendous in that game. Worst game he's had in 3 years easily.
Yeah, and you've got to – it can't just be from the outside because you let him step up in the pocket, he's going to carve you up. So Cam Hayward, hopefully Carlos Davis gets healthy and comes back next week. You can get those two guys in base and in nickel situations rushing from the middle of the field. Sure. Get pressure into his lap, disrupt his timing, and you have to bracket Devontae Adams and ask the Packers to beat you with a Marquez Valdez-Scantling or I'm not even sure who their number 3. I think it's Randall Cobb at this point. It's fixable for this next week because I don't think the Packers are as good as I thought they were coming into the year, especially with David Bakhtiari is on IR. He won't be back for this game Sunday. It sounds like their starting left tackle right now, Elgton Jenkins, is out, and he shifted from, I believe it was center to left tackle. So they're dealing with
their issues. They have their issues too.
They have their issues, and I would not put it past this Steelers team under Mike Tomlin to turn in a performance like they have the last 2 weeks, go on the road in the game where everybody expects them to lose, and they look like world beaters. That seems to be par for the course. But I do think it's fixable this week, but after that, I'm a little concerned.
And we are seeing predictions here, 42-17, Green Bay, 41-3, Green Bay. We have somebody here in the chat who literally is saying the Steelers will not win another game. Right. I'd like to find out who you are. I'm willing to bet quite a bit. They're going to win one more. I will bet you several cases of whatever beer you choose that it's going to be at least one more victory for the Steelers this year. But it will be a question mark if they can fix this for the long haul of this season. How long Ben will last. I saw a lot of reports prior to this game that NFL GMs are talking that they're concerned Ben can last the whole season. Alan and I were actually joking. It's basically the NFL GM saying, we agree what everyone else agrees. The NFL GMs agree the sky is blue. Of course that's a concern.
What's funny is I wrote up a quick story before kickoff for Steelers Depot this morning, and it was like, you guys finally sat down and watched film. Congratulations, you did your job, Yeah. But it's always like that, and I think maybe some of that came from Roethlisberger's camp too. You know how he likes to play up his injuries, and I'm really struggling. Nobody believes in me, and it gives him that extra boost. So, much ado about nothing at this point with that report.
Yeah, that's very true. Of course, the Steelers will have that game coming up against the Packers in Lambeau, and maybe getting out of Pittsburgh. And certainly during the Tomlin era, it has happened where they were let down, they turned around and had an upset victory, and then fans would scratch their head at the end of the day and say, well, the Steelers are a 4 seed because they lost some games they shouldn't have lost, and if they could beat this team, why can't they beat this other team? When nothing really makes sense. It's almost like looking at a college football season when it comes to watching the Steelers, then the Broncos, then the Seahawks. They're back home for those 2 games, then the bye. So they have a home-friendly opening part of the season, which maybe isn't good for Pittsburgh based on how they played so far. But if you get by that Green Bay game, it doesn't get any easier. But we'll see, because then after the bye, Cleveland, Chicago, and Detroit, Cleveland certainly is not who they used to be, and that is a contending team. But maybe the next couple could be winnable games. Definitely looks like there's less winnable games on this schedule than many people predicting prior to the year based on what we are now seeing from the Steelers, who lose this one to Cincinnati 24-10. Pittsburgh now 1-2 on the year. I'm going to end it with this, because we talked about this at the beginning of the show, and I think we both can agree that Ben Roethlisberger is the starter entering the Green Bay game. It's just going to happen unless he's not healthy, and there's no reports right now that he left the game anything but as healthy as can be. There's no extra injury that we're aware of. If he's healthy, he's going to be the starter going into Green Bay at this point. Obviously, Mason Rudolph's QB2, Haskins is QB3. Like it or not, that's the situation. What would need to happen for you if it's up to you? And then what do you think needs to happen if it's now up to Mike Tomlin, as it is up to Mike Tomlin, for Ben Roethlisberger to either not start a week or get benched in a game if he is healthy? So if Ben Roethlisberger is healthy, what needs to occur for you and what needs to occur for Mike Tomlin for him not to be the quarterback of this team moving forward?
I think I'll start with Tomlin. I think it would have to be a long-term injury. I don't think they're ever going to pull Ben. I honestly don't think they'll ever pull Ben from a game. He would not let it happen. I mean, we've seen.
What if we see the Cleveland Browns playoff game? Because that's the worst game he's played in years, and that was a 4-pick game that he single-handedly basically lost in the first few minutes. And obviously, Ben's a Hall of Famer, doesn't get enough credit by a lot of fans. But we've seen bad Ben, but we haven't seen that bad Ben. Would that bad Ben maybe do it?
Maybe. Honestly, it would really depend. But I truly believe that they're just going to let this guy go out on his sword or on his shield. But for me, man, at this point, his right arm would have to fall off. Honestly, I mean, this guy has played.
Is that more to do with Mason and Haskins, or is it to do with Ben? If you had more confidence in the backups,
I think it has more to do with Mason. I don't think we've seen enough from Dwayne at this point to say you're in there. Mason, he has less mobility than Ben Roethlisberger. He has a better. I think at this point it's safe to say he has a better arm, can probably hit those deep balls. But if the issue is the offensive line stinks, isn't giving him enough time, he's getting battered in the pocket, it might be worse for Mason Rudolph. So I don't see Roethlisberger leaving a game to be benched or not being a quarterback heading into a week in 2021. If he's around in 2022 and the Steelers have a young quarterback they like, all bets are off. But this year, I think, unfortunately for Steelers fans, what we have is what you get under center, barring injury.
Yeah, it really does feel like we could debate Mason Rudolph, debate Dwayne Haskins all day, as some like to do. And I've myself got caught into that sometimes recently as well. But all of it really doesn't matter. In all reality, the 2021 season was going to be Big Ben or bust for the Steelers. If you see Mason Rudolph or Dwayne Haskins in any extended period of time in this season, then this season is not headed to the postseason. Already you know that, no matter what you see out of them and what you think about the future. And then, of course, we'll just debate all offseason who should be the guy and if they should draft somebody or what should occur. I do think that while Ben won't be benched this year, I do agree with you there. I don't think Tomlin's going to do it. I think that probably was even discussed. Ben, I'll take a lot less money. I'm still your best option. But if you embarrass me, then I'm going to turn into drama Ben.
Yeah, you don't want an Eli Manning situation like when they went to Daniel Jones, where it was
where Eli Manning wasn't aware that was going to occur, and then he told the media, "I didn't know this was going to happen." And we know Ben's not shocked. So if that would occur, Ben would be calling everyone around to let them know he was not aware that was going to happen. So I don't think they want that either. However, if it gets to a certain point, I do wonder that if there's at least a conversation between them and Ben that, hey, you can't come back next year, that maybe it's more of agreed upon that this is it for Ben. Maybe entering the year it wasn't 100%, even though I thought it was. Maybe now it is. Who knows, though? We're not going to know until the season progresses, and this season is going to progress right now with the Steelers 1-2, traveling to Lambeau Field to take on the Green Bay Packers. Josh, I appreciate the time. I'll let you go with that here. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday evening. I'll try to get myself out of here at Heinz Field as quick as I can. We're definitely glad to have you here on the show and hope to have you back. So again, Josh Carney joining us out of the Beaver County Times and Steelers Depot, as that'll do it for this edition of our Steelers postgame show on Pittsburgh Sports Live. Sorry about the sun smashing my face. Had a lot of crowd around me here in my undisclosed location of the press box. Couldn't do anything else better right now, but Josh at least gave you a nice visual of himself and you got to hear me a bit. But nonetheless, the Steelers lose this one 24-10. Steelers now 1-2 on the year. The Bengals no longer beat around and bullied by the Steelers. They pick up a road victory, a big win for them to rebound after last week. And the Steelers now have a big game coming up on the road in Lambeau. As Josh put it, we've seen Tomlin teams in the past, a different bunch, but teams in the past turn around after a bad outing, losing to a team they should beat, and then beating a team that nobody thinks they're going to beat. Steelers, out of these 3 games, they beat a team that many think are going to win the AFC on the road in Buffalo and have lost the two teams that people thought they should beat. I think the Raiders might be headed to the playoffs. I don't know if the Bengals are there yet. They're coming off of a bad loss. Steelers lose to Cincinnati and kind of get bullied around by the Bengals. So you just never know week to week in the National Football League. Just look around the league. A lot of confusion going on, a lot of upsets going on. But the Steelers certainly have a lot of problems, a lot that I don't think can be fixed this year. It could be a very long year. It could get even worse than it currently is. But either way, we're going to be there with you. You're going to be tuned in, I am sure. So I appreciate everybody chatting along and watching along. This will also be archived over there at Steelers Now, which is where you should head for all our post-game coverage, including our game recap and then our post-game video reaction. That will live right here on Pittsburgh Sports Live, as well as Steelers Now from the locker room section. That'll do it for this one here. Again, for all of us at Pittsburgh Sports Live, Steelers Now, for my guest, Josh Carney, out of the Beaver County Times and Steelers Depot, I'm Mike Asti. The Steelers lose it 24-10. Many of these problems may not have a fix this year. It could get bad. It could go from bad to even worse very, very quickly.